Welcome, everyone. I'm going to allow some time for people to come in and get ready. Maybe grab a bottle of water, glass of water, pen and paper, because I think you're probably going to want to take notes. And Sarah's in the background. She has this chat is enabled. So if people want to talk on the chat, you're more than welcome to. What we would ask is if you have specific questions for Bryan or myself, please put them in the Q&A so that we can answer these. I have a bunch of questions prepared, but it's really open. So if you have questions, please put them in. We'll try and get to all of them. In terms of replays, Sarah let everyone know that we will send the replay out with a transcript to anyone who's registered. Ideally, that will be done next week. I do have my computer IT guy moving to Malaysia for a couple of months at the end of next week. So hopefully he will be able to get it all done before he leaves the country. If not, you will get the replay at some point. It just may be a little delayed. So sorry about that. I am going to give a few more minutes for people to file in, and then we'll get started. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, and there's never not enough questions around this topic, and it's endless. So definitely write the questions down.
Yes.
Because I learned from all of you as well, you know?
Absolutely. I learn from my patients all the time. That's how we keep learning, through adversity and challenges and obstacles, right?
Yeah, and new perspectives, even though we specialize in what we specialize, even from our clients, we learn different new perspectives and how to ask questions differently,
Absolutely. All right, so let's go get started. Welcome, everyone. Today I have as my guest Bryan Johnson. Bryan is a builder, master construction person, biologist. How do you like to refer to yourself?
Building science, contractor, builder, healthy home builder. Healthy home builder is kind of the phrase that I've adopted. It makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, that makes the most sense. That's great. Fantastic. Okay, so we're talking about building healthy homes, and of course, from my perspective, we can only have healthy bodies if we're in a healthy home, healthy environment. So what does it mean to you to have a healthy home?
A healthy home is, so the name of my company is Synergy 360, and Synergy means like everything's synergistic, right? And all of looking at it from a building perspective, like all the materials plug together synergistically. And 360, it's the holistic overview of everything, right? It's just not one thing. So for example, working with a professional like yourself, like what are we looking for in the first place, right? To help identify, is it from the home? Is it from offices? What are these areas, right? So I took the approach in my background of like health and performance and, kind of getting into the biohacking world, which opened me up to environmental, functional, and integrative medicine, which was huge, because all of that helped point me back to the direction of like, well, what's in the environment, right? And so within that envelope, I look at the homes should be a place of healing, not adding a toxic load back into the body. And so for me, it's just looking at all aspects of construction. We're looking at the external environmental factor. Again, whether it's office, whether it's home, we're exposing ourselves, and then to identifying, what's in the home, how the home is built, And then of course our own personal health practices, eating and nutrition and those different types of things, right? So, we're looking at bringing everything together, very in a harmonious way, right? It's just not all about medicine. It's just not all about the house. It's everything. So that's how I look at what makes a healthy home. Of course, we'll go further into that, but it's the whole overview of everything, and then we dial it into the environment.
Right. So it's about the air and having healthy air. It's about the water, having healthy sources of water. It's about avoiding chemical toxins, avoiding mold exposure, limiting EMF, all of those things.
Yeah. So the first thing that I even look at is the environment. That's the number one.
What do you mean by that?
Everything that you just explained, like where's the water coming from? Where's our homes located? From an electrosmog standpoint, we're looking at the EMFs, right? We're looking at the air quality, because a lot of these things are kind of unavoidable. And these are some questions that you have coming up, so what do we do to help like mitigate or reduce or, protect us from that? I always look at the home as being the third layer of skin. So we have the first layer is our skin, and the second layer is our clothing, right? And then the third layer is the home, right? And the home is to help protect, nature is the gold standard. And how do we mimic, nature within the home environment? But at the same time, nature can impose some pretty heavy duty environmental factors in itself too, right? And so the home is to protect us from the unwanted factors of what nature presents. So again, the environmental aspect is everything: the air quality, the exposures to electrosmog, different forms of EMFs, again, the water quality, and then, using building materials, which that's what opens up the realm of the exposure to, toxic chemicals.
Right. So what's the difference between a healthy home and a green home? Because people throw that word green around a lot.
Yeah, we refer to it as like greenwashing. There's a lot of good organizations out there that really started this approach early on, these different councils, and they started these programs. But it was what I found interesting, my background goes almost 25 years in the construction industry, both commercial and residential. And so it was really interesting to watch these councils and these programs. But it was interesting because early on, before I understood like what greenwashing was, I'm like, man, there's kind of a flaw here, because they're looking at green just from an energy, like a lot of people have heard of like Energy Star rating, right? And from an Energy Star energy efficiency, they're calling that green, but they're not even really addressing anything of the building materials and toxic building materials, or, they're really not looking at it. It's more on the commercial side. It's starting to adopt over into the residential side, but they're really, they're kind of carbon footprint, the negative carbon footprint, like, hey, what can we do to contribute to, lessen the emissions, right? Like, so there's that aspect of it as well. So energy efficiency, world energy consumption, on a global scale, which is huge. Right? I mean, that's really vital. But when it trickles down the line, especially into residential homes, because they don't look at residential as the same as commercial, then there's that aspect of, the disconnect of green, so what I like to refer to is non-toxic building, because if we're building non-toxic in the residential realm, that would be green. Right. Because we're not using the chemicals, we're not using the heavy practices in manufacturing. So by default, that would be considered green. So that's what when somebody uses the term green, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, because it could be energy efficiency or, negative carbon footprint or different things like that. It's not so much related to health.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's important. It's an important distinction for consumers to understand that green doesn't mean healthy.
Right.
Like
Yeah, no, it really doesn't,
green means hopefully sustainable, but what good is a airtight home if it's filled with mold and other chemicals? It's just going to be
Yes.
awful.
Well, and that's a good point too, the sustainability too. It's like, then when we go so far on the sustainable side, or, so far on the green side, and totally non-toxic, then you start to compromise on the sustainability aspect, and so for me, coming in as a performance builder, I'm always looking out for performance. So I kind of came from like the extreme side of performance, but with that comes a lot of plasticizers, a lot of fire retardants, just a lot of different PCBs and all these different types of things, because it's going to last for 1,000 years, but
Right, just what we want.
yeah, exactly. So like, my mission early on was like, oh, I'm going to build these homes that are multi-generational and, that's going to last thousands of years, but yet I'm taking too far advantage of modern technology, not being really mindful of kind of like the ancient practices, like in Europe, they have buildings that are, 1,000 years old today, and they're built all natural, right?
And
So
they're a lot less toxic.
yes, absolutely. Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's this balance that we have to try and find. You as a builder, me as somebody who lives in a home, everyone who lives in a home, we have to find this balance between what is sustainable and what is non-toxic, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what are some of the biggest challenges people have in having a healthy home?
I think some of the biggest challenges is, I wrote this down. I think personally, this is just my opinion, is just lack of education.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's the number one, because really, is whose agenda are we following? Who do we listen to? Who do we follow? And that's really kind of what really brought me forward, going, look, I understand both aspects, and I really need to get my message clear so I can help educate, the architects, the designers, the builders, the clients, to really change this. Because in the residential realm of, like production building, they don't really want to hear this mission and the message too much. And so it's all about smart homes and, again, energy efficiency and all these things, but they're not, when we start getting into the non-toxic and in the safe way of construction, no one really talks about that. And so we have to have, first and foremost, we need to have education. Once we have the education, then we can take the approach, right? And also too, not taking a fear-based approach, because I hear a lot of that, and especially kind of like in the environmental standpoint, there's a lot of fear around that. Like, okay, well, this is great, and 80%, they say that 80 to 90% homes are sick, and diagnosed as what's referred to as sick building syndrome.
Right.
So it's like, okay, let's be aware, let's educate, let's be aware, and let's take action on what we can do. The second thing would probably be, there would be a cost factor, right? That would be limiting, of course. But again, without education, how do we know what actions to take, that are from the least cost, getting into, more elaborate types of renovations. And then speaking of renovations, it would be new construction versus doing renovation work, remodeling. Believe it or not, it's easier to build a new home, because then we could factor all the design. We could source all the proper materials.
Avoid all the mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many factors into that. But so renovations can be a little bit more challenging again, but it can be done. I definitely want to stress